Mark, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be with you all. I want to first make sure everybody can hear. Can you hear back there? Did you see the excitement build immediately when I... thank you very much for sharing part of your day with me, allowing me to share part of this day with you. And Mark, thank you for that stirring tribute to my conventional journalistic role in our great craft. Let's begin with the news of the day, as is our wont. By 64 to 35, the Senate has supported cloture, giving a procedural go-ahead to the comprehensive immigration reform legislation that the President and Senator Ted Kennedy, and Senator John McCain, oh yes, and the other Arizona senator, or more properly the senator from Arizona, John Kyle, so desperately wanted. So a big round of applause for the democratic process. If you, no. Obviously, there are people in this town who are in considerable denial, as well as disconnect from the constituents that they were elected to represent. There is not so much distance between them and the primary corporate interest, socio-ethnic centric interest, and special interest who convened, gathered, and coalesced around this legislation that I describe rather routinely as simply disastrous to the interest of the common good and national security. Apparently that wasn't persuasive with about 64 senators, and I'm only frankly moderately surprised that the number was 64. I assumed it would be something more like 61 or 62. As my colleagues in this room will attest, I said that I believe that this vote would go forward in support of both the Democratic leadership of the Senate and, of course, the President. What happens now is debate begins on a number of amendments, somewhere between 22 and 24. The last I received word from our newsroom and our bureau, the word was that the amendments had not been distributed to the senators. I don't know if anyone has got any more recent information than that. So, to review, what began as a group of 12 senators meeting to create the grand bargain, as it was styled, led by Senator John Kyle on the Republican side, Senator Ted Kennedy on the Democratic side, which quickly whittled its way down to 10, and then with the departure of Senator Isaacson and Senator Chambliss from the group, turned out to be a grand bargain among 8 people who, without discussion with their colleagues in the Senate, crafted this bill in perfect alliance with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the biggest business lobby in the country, La Raza, and other ethnocentric interest groups working very hard to support this bill. And of course, I suppose Cardinal Roger Mahoney managed to fly in at least once from Los Angeles, where he is the Archbishop of the diocese, to push this forward. Interestingly, the White House this morning, with the President, brought together a group of people. Amongst the groups there, of course, Hispanic activist groups, business groups. There was one group of people missing. There was no representative there for the American middle class, working men and women. And so business is pretty much as usual in Washington, D.C. Now we will see what happens when this bill moves forward in debate, which amendments of these 22 to 24, depending on which it is, obviously, move forward for discussion. But having won the procedural vote, I will tell you that the odds are now strikingly in favor of the Senate passing this legislation. Why should you care? A couple of reasons. One is that this legislation has not required a single public hearing. It has not advanced out of committee in the United States Senate. There has been no rigorous research whatsoever by any government agency or department of the economic, social, and fiscal impact of this legislation. This is striking even in Trotsky-like terms in an authoritarian government. But for it to occur in what is a democratic republic is, to me, absolutely shameful. But if shame were a relevant emotion or reaction amongst our elected officials, I probably wouldn't be here addressing you today because there would be so little for us to talk about. Instead, there is much for us to talk about. I will be glad to talk to you about illegal immigration and border security, the failure of this administration to honor its constitutional responsibilities, to honor common sense in many cases. I will be delighted to talk to you about the failings of the left or the right, liberals, conservatives, Republicans, or Democrats. Matter of fact, I am eager and anxious to do so, because the most neglected group of people in this town, and I have to tell you, when I visit your fair city, some days it doesn't seem like there's much fair about this city, except in the most pleasing aesthetic sense. But fair, it isn't. And fair is not the watchword of the day in our nation's capital. The American public right now is being disturbed by both political parties. Mark suggested that there are those who like to attack my journalistic standing, and in conventional terms, I think that they probably have a point, one that, of course, I can smash instantly in debate. But I also understand the impetus, their motivation. But let me address the issue of being an advocacy journalist, and I am flattered to be one of the few journalists that you would ask to speak, and I do consider myself a journalist, albeit an advocacy journalist.